Hey everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I have another interview for you today. I got to sit down with director BJ Verot to talk about his newest movie, The Return, which is available now. It was also really cool talking to BJ because he is a working stuntman. We do talk about that a little bit. Not enough for, as far as I'm concerned, because I thought it was absolutely fascinating. But BJ's a super cool guy. Return looks cool, and if you remember, about a week or so ago, we posted an interview with Echo Anderson, who is one of the stars of The Return. Hey everyone, Adam here, So Wizard Podcast. I'm sitting down with BJ Verot to talk his career and his newest movie, The Return, coming August 10th on VOD. How you doing, BJ?
Hey, not too bad. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. This should be a lot of fun because you have a cool, varied career in show business. You kind of do a little bit of everything.
Yeah. It's been a good kind of trajectory, I guess, on how my career has panned out. I'm a filmmaker, I'm a writer director, and then I'm also a stunt performer for film and television. So my two streams are both very rewarding and very different, I guess you could say.
Very different, yeah. So to go all the way back to the beginning, was it the writing directing that you wanted to do, or were you a stuntman first and then said, hey, I want to get behind the camera too?
I think there's always been a drive to want to direct and tell stories since I was little. So I would have to go that route. And then I was taking film studies in university, and one of the primary stunt coordinators here in Manitoba, Winnipeg, Manitoba, where I'm from, he was running a stage combat class. So I took that, knowing that he casts people in stunt roles. So I really applied myself and hoped for the best. And I got a call for one project, and then that slowly rolled into another project. And eventually I was kind of building up a bit of a resume on the stunt side too, which is great because, I have a background in like judo and wrestling, and, I can do like flips and stuff like that. So all these little skill sets kind of combined really nicely as a good base for stunt performance.
Yeah, that's awesome. The physicality and being able to have control over your movements like that, I imagine, would put you kind of at the top of the class.
Yeah, it definitely helps. And as it turns out, some of the guys and girls that I was in that class with, we're all working together still. So I must have come up with a really good group because we're all kind of, depending on who's getting called for what. When you're doing let's say stunt doubling work, I'm like just under 6 feet, 155. So if someone kind of suits that frame, then I get the call. And if they're 5'7", my phone's not ringing. So
Right, yeah. That makes sense. You kind of have to fit the mold.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you primarily do stage combat kind of things? Like, are you the guys always getting thrown through the wall, or?
Yeah, I guess the primary kind of skill set that I have on the stunt side of things is I fall down good. So I do a lot of fighting, and I get thrown around a lot. I've pretty good vertical, so I can get some good height on jumping and getting launched. I assist well when the big guys need to launch me, which is good. And I do a little bit of driving here and there as well. So, but the primary stuff is the fighting and falling and taking bumps, I guess. Yeah.
That doesn't sound so bad. The stuff that I find would be like, oh, I'd like to get into this world. It'd be fun. Oh, I don't want to get set on fire.
Yeah, done that too. But
oh, you have?
Those are pretty rare. Like it just kind of depends on the movie, right? And again, if it's 50-50. It might be a lady getting lit on fire, and then I'm already out of the discussion. But yeah, I've done that before too. That one obviously comes with a longer kind of checksum of safety protocols you have to go through in preparation for that. But those ones are a bit more rare. Some of those higher caliber kind of stunts that come along.
Yeah, how does that feel? Like
it's weird.
Like a suit and you're coated in something, or?
Yeah. A lot of cold flame retardant gel, which is just one of many phases of kind of the prep. But it's really interesting because you're wearing your costume layer on top of whatever the character is wearing, and then you have kind of these sub layers that are all soaked in a fire retardant gel. And it's interesting because you actually are so cold, if left too long. Like once you're ready, you have to go and you have to do the stunt because it's so cold, and you're in so many dense layers of wet gel coated clothing. It's actually wicking your body heat away, and you could actually face hypothermia before you face the other end of the spectrum when you're lit on fire. So it really becomes a very tight kind of time frame that you need to operate under. So you get really, really cold up front. And in my experience, I was really cold until about maybe the 30-35 second mark. And then I could feel the heat coming through. And It's an interesting experience, obviously, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So your first time through that, was it like, oh, what am I getting myself into? Or you're like, this should be cool.
It was okay. We did a little where I'm from, we're really lucky. We do things safe. We kind of move through it really slowly. We got a rehearsal. We got to feel it at a much less extreme level. So you kind of level up to it almost. And so there was opportunities to just get more comfortable with the situation. And there's little tricks and techniques that you can use to try to wick the heat away as well if you're getting hot spots and whatnot. So it all worked out pretty well overall. And generally, like, the attitude is you kind of come at it pretty calm. You kind of try to take in the knowledge and figure out exactly what you need to do so that you can look like you are just losing your mind on set later, but it's performance related. So
right. Okay. Very cool. And you mentioned you also did stunt driving.
Yeah. Those have come up occasionally as well. Just recently, actually, that Bob Odenkirk film Nobody was filmed here in town, and there's like a chase sequence there. So that's probably one of the most recent things that I had done. I guess that was just before the pandemic ramped up. So I guess that would be late 2019. But that was really fun because it was me and a few other folks kind of getting our own individual vehicles. And then they had this kind of like warthog razor scooter with like a crane mounted to the front. And he was kind of like ripping between the vehicles. And, you kind of pre-orchestrate where you move. And so that one was really fun. It was a really narrow street. So you were working with some narrow margins as you were kind of crossing past each other on like counter moves and stuff. So that was really cool. That was a fun one.
Awesome.
And it's a great movie too.
Yeah, that's true too. I know everyone on this podcast loved it. So
yeah, it was good. It was it's the writer of John Wick and the director of Hardcore Henry and the DOP from Midsummer. Like, holy geez, that is
and then Bob Odenkirk going out of typecast. So
yeah, and that's just it. The cast was crazy too. Christopher Lloyd, RZA, Bob Odenkirk. Like, yeah, that was a really fun one.
Yeah, that is awesome. I could probably ask you stunt questions all day, but that's like only half of your career. So your writing side, when did that start up? Because that seems to be like the thing that you could start with the easiest. Not necessarily that you did, but...
Yeah, I would agree with that because you don't need much to start, and you can really hone your craft whether or not you are going to production and making even shorts, let's say. So when I was in university... for me, I'm always jotting down notes and ideas. And so I did since about 2015, I've probably done about 7 or 8 short films leading up to the feature. And it's good because over the course of those shorts, I've kind of built up a rapport with some of the genre film festivals and that kind of thing, which is great because I've been lucky enough to be consistent, or I'm kind of in one cycle, out the next one, and then I usually kind of have something else to show for again later on. So it was really nice once the feature came around. Now, for the return, I co-wrote that with Ken Janssens. He had the initial concept in mind, and as a director, so the director side of me just loved the idea that it really starts as a very grounded classic haunting, and very organically transitions to that big shift in the third act when we go science fiction. So I thought that was really fun. And those are two genres that as a fan of film, I like to watch personally as well.
Yeah, that's got to help too, to really be into the genre that you're making, the familiarity and all that.
Yeah, definitely. And it just kind of keeps the fire lit too when you're up against challenges and whatnot. You know why you're there, you know why you want to make it, and you just push through.
Right. Yeah. Do you find that being able to write, or in this case, co-write and direct, really helps get your vision across?
I think so. Ken was really gracious with allowing me to make adjustments where I was kind of hoping to. One primary thing that I think we did was the script was initially about 120 pages, which was, in my opinion, it was just too bloated. So we really whittled it down to about 90 pages. I wanted this to be very lean so that when the viewer goes on this journey with Roger and Jordan and Beth, you're learning alongside them. And we really needed to distill it down to kind of its core components without losing kind of the relationship between the three friends. And also trying to, have some of those scare moments baked in as well without overstaying our welcome. The budget wasn't huge. So, for every page that we were able to whittle down without sacrificing the narrative, that was a huge benefit for us. But as a director, yes, outside of The Return, I've written and directed virtually every project that I've ever done. So, I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of stories to tell, and the best way to do it is write it, know how to direct, and then I've taken on a lot of the producing for a lot of these things as well to make sure I'm not up to this point, not reliant on others to help me make my film. As things continue to grow and get bigger in scale and scope, there's obviously going to be more people coming on board for some of these new up and coming projects that I have in development. But up until this point, it's given me a really strong platform to start with, because I understand the ins and the outs of the producing. I don't necessarily love it, but I do love that I understand it, so that I can talk to financiers, investors, other filmmakers, and it can really kind of almost serve as the glue to hold everything together as you're just marching this thing forward.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think that's a good thing for aspiring people to hear, that you kind of have to know how every department works, even if you're only focused on, say, directing or writing, one or the other. That way you know how to talk to the people that are on your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, on that note, I guess more on the producing side, like we have a very, very good tax credit here in Winnipeg, Canada, where I'm from. We have the best tax credit in Canada. So, I mean, when I'm talking to people who might be coming on board for X amount of dollars, I mean, it's a lot easier for me to explain how their risk is mitigated, and how their money will go that much further as the budget's kind of fleshed out. And I'm kind of getting into like the administrative kind of maybe boring stuff for people who are more interested in the creative, but without that side, like there may not be any creative. So it's a necessary evil that I don't necessarily love. Like I said, like I feel like I'm pretty good at it. It's worked out so far, but it'll be really nice once a few more people are on board, and I can start to kind of like hand off certain aspects of the producing side.
For sure, but I think you're touching on something, like you said, it's very important, because we're kind of in this heyday of like the technology, and the way to put things out has never been easier.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can shoot something on your iPhone, it can be on YouTube the next day if you're diligent enough. Maybe you should spend more than one day on a film, but but like you said, you have to learn all those little logistical things, because any little thing is not a little thing. You still have to light the scene and do sound and do all this stuff. And like you said, budgets and working with actors and other people, it might be your favorite passion project, but it doesn't mean 50 people are going to volunteer their time for free.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just it. There's many layers that, it just keeps going and going. And, you're coming at any project with an army. And luckily for me, because I'd done so many shorts on my way up, a lot of the crew on my feature were a lot of the crew that had helped me on my shorts, which was great. I mean, so I already had a very strong working shorthand with a lot of the crew. And I mean, like they're my ride or die team, they've been with me from the start. So it was so good to get to kind of that next level and have all of my friends who were just killing it on the day, and it allowed me to focus more on what I needed to keep my attention on.
That's also really cool that you've worked with them before, and you kind of got to do it like on a trial basis, because a short obviously is less to film, less budget, just by the nature of the length. So when you get to do a full feature length movie, you're already kind of vetted. Like, your team inside and out. They know how you work, you know how they work. It sounds very important, even though it might not be a scenario that somebody else could force to set up.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, something else I could even add to that too is not only did I come up with the same crew, but on every short film that I'd kind of developed and put into production, I always tried to kind of approach it with some kind of end goal in mind on my skill set, I guess you could say. So, for example, I did a short film called Echoes in the Ice. It's like an Arctic Lovecraftian sci-fi horror film. And that you can watch it on Dust if you're interested, but it's pretty VFX heavy, and I wanted that on my reel so that when I got to the feature level, people knew that I could put my money where my mouth was. I did another one called After the Rain. It was like a micro short that did really well and went to a bunch of festivals, but it was really heavy on the makeup special effects. So, when I needed to kind of tackle that in a larger format, I already have experience with what are the steps necessary to take. Like whether it's life casting and the sculpting and the turnaround on certain elements, and what are things going to look like from concept to completion. So I'm always looking to kind of like add one key attribute per project, so that when I encounter them, on a feature or when the stakes are higher, I can more easily kind of like assimilate that that challenge and then destroy it. So so that's something that I kind of set out to do early on, and I really do think it paid off
Yeah,
in the
that's
future.
really smart. That's really, really smart. And for the VFX and the makeup effects,
Hmm.
did you have like a direct hand on it, or did you just hire somebody whose work you've seen and trusted just so you could get a feel for the process?
There was definitely a lot of back and forth, collaborating and chatting. So, okay, for the VFX side, the same guy that worked on Echoes in the Ice, which was my VFX heavy film, he was also on The Return, and he did. I mean, God, we had over 100 VFX shots. So, I mean, if you want to talk about a low budget film being overly ambitious, you can look at the post production schedule, and that was a big indicator. But I'm pretty happy with how that all turned out. But I did come in with the idea that like I wanted those wisps, and what does that mean? Like if she's moving in such a way, like how much tracking is that? And you're mindful of your foreground elements for roto and all of those types of elements. So yeah, that was a big thing to consider. And then on the makeup side, Emerson Ziffel did the makeup. He's like an amazing special effects makeup special effects artist. He's worked on like Krampus. He did the werewolves on Wolf Cop, and he worked on that big Apple Plus show C, and he's been on The Stand, and I could go on and on. The guy's amazing. But I mean, he essentially crafted two suits for the ghost because of the nature of the story and the way it's told in the contemporary timeline. She's dark and wispy to kind of feed into that trope of like the classic haunted house. And when you start to watch the film at face value, it comes off as a very haunting subgenre-esque film. But I wanted to play with that idea that when Richard's mom or Roger's mom is like sent in two directions in the timeline, contemporary mom is wispy and ethereal, but like her physical presence traveled back. So it's like almost like two parts of her being had been separated, so that I could explore two different ways to play with the haunting elements and the scare elements and the aesthetics of that. And so then, unfortunately, Emerson was now tasked with like making a filleted human essentially. And holy man, he knocked that out of the park. Like everyone just loves the skinned mom, and my only regret is that we couldn't use her even more. So I guess I might just
Right.
have to flay some people in the future and we just get them
Yeah.
running on the street. So
There you go. That is awesome. While you guys were writing this, because you said you have to think practically too. You have to be writing it and thinking, okay, we also have to shoot this. We can't just write, literally anything. It has to be practical
yeah,
enough to shoot, even though we can bridge the gap with technology. It doesn't sound like you pulled back at all. Was there any thought of that?
yeah. I don't know. I guess I can be kind of stubborn in that on that front, where I really, really want to. As I mentioned, I mean, it was a pretty ambitious film for the budget that we had, but I just hate conceding things that I think would just make the film so much more amazing and just help elevate it. And so like the time travel sequence, or certain shots where we got like this really close up shot in her eye. You can see like the energy flickering in her eye and stuff like that. Like these are just things I didn't want to have to lose if we didn't have to. So we all really had to figure out a way of first of all, how can we be efficient on set to make it happen? Um, and then what is it going to look like in post? Is the juice worth the squeeze on the time that we're investing on set? So luckily on the makeup special effects side, I mean, having gone through like the ringer on just a feature where there's just so much post VFX stuff, I really have to say I was loving the practical elements, because like that scene's cut and you're like, and it looks really good. She looks so good.
Right.
And then you look at the other one and it's like a bald, wigless, ghost walking, and you're like, oh boy, this one's gonna take a while.
We got some
So
work here. Yeah.
yeah, but no, again, I think that comes down to just being really lucky with the team that I had. Like I said, they were my ride or die team, and I don't think they wanted to settle for anything either. And and I'm the one who gets to benefit from that, because I get to talk about this in the interview about how amazing they did to make sure that the movie looks as good as it could have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you to all of them, because they made it what it was. It was amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's cool that you've done enough, you have enough experience that you knew you didn't have to concede. Where if you had cut something that you really wanted afterwards, you might have known, oh, we could have done it. And then you would have been kind of kicking yourself. So it's cool that you didn't have to do that.
Yeah. Actually, that's a great point that you make, because there was one thing that we did shoot on set that we opted to not do just because it would have been more time. And I don't know if it necessarily would have looked that great. And what we were doing was we did this thing where we kind of did like a 3D track of Richard. And during the time travel scene, we were like, well, maybe we can like shrink him down and then like we'll kind of animate him a little bit so he looks like he's like spinning. And I was like, but it just felt the nature of the way that we shot it, where we're kind of floating over his shoulders and pushing in through memories and stuff like that. It would have just felt a little bit too against the grain to go pull out super wide and see him like, I don't know, going down like a little time tunnel. It just didn't fit. But we shot it on set to make sure that we had the asset in place just in case we wanted to explore it further. Ultimately, we decided against it, but you're exactly right. I'd rather make sure I have what I need on set so that we can maybe determine how we want to go about it in post, as opposed to just killing it up front. So we had the time, we need that work, and we just made the call not to use it. But that's a good example of something where we spent a little bit of time to do a little bit more research and development on the back end to see if it was worth it. And ultimately that one wasn't.
That's smart. And it's probably one of those cases where whether it's your first feature or your 50th, like you're probably going to always have to have some kind of coverage that you're kind of back pocket stuff, like just in case.
Yeah, actually, this is not exactly related, but what we did this thing that I want to do all the time because it was so handy. Basically what we did was, as of day one, we handed off the footage to an in-house editor. Like he was basically assembling the film like the next day. So, if he got scenes 5 and 7, the very next day he'd edit scenes 5 and 7. And if we were still in the house, which we were in the house a lot, he'd go, what would just really help tie this together? Could you just get an insert of her like opening the drawer? Like, let's say she's getting a knife, but he's like, if you just get like a follow down insert, if you have an attack of opportunity moment, it would really just help tie the scene together. So that was so cool that like we were getting like real time feedback while still being on set, where it's like, if we had the time, we could just steal that one moment so that at least it was in our back pocket to go into the edit later.
Yeah, I find that really smart because I've actually heard that from other directors too, where they're either them or their editor are pretty much, even if it's not day to day, like week to week, even editing, so that before you wrap and everyone goes their separate ways, you can fill in those little blanks that just make it that much smoother.
Yeah, exactly. And a really nice benefit to all that as well is, I mean, we're talking a really, really rough cut, but 2 days after wrap, like we had an assembly of the film already, which was awesome.
Yeah.
So what a great starting point, Now, and the nice thing about it too is, I'm just coming off set, so when I watched the footage, it was still pretty fresh, like even without like the continuity notes. I was like, oh, there was this one take where we did this thing. Can we dig that up real quick and take a look at that? And then like we could drop shots in already, like we're dropping shots into a loosely edited together scene just for performance, just to see if it had a little something extra, based on what I felt like I was experiencing on set. So that was really cool. Yeah, it was a nice opportunity that we created for ourselves in hindsight.
Definitely. That is cool. I'm sure you'll probably be trying to continue that going forward too.
Definitely. Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
And then my next goal is just like having more money. So you just get those like maybe that's the difference between like an 18-day shoot or a 20-day shoot or a 22-day shoot. And you just have that little bit less to shoot in terms of like script pages. And you can just spend a little bit more attention to just a little bit of extra coverage so that it's just that much sweeter in post for the options. So that's one thing I would really like to. Some days we were really like pedal to the metal, but we got what we needed, but it was tight a few times.
Was 18 days the shoot
16
time?
Is what we shot. So when I was mentioning the 2, I was already adding 2 to that. And I was like,
yeah,
so nice.
Yeah, 16, that is quick.
Yeah, it was tight. But that was a doable timeline because, like I mentioned, in the script edit, we whittled it down to 90. So it was lean and we knew what we needed to get on certain days. And actually all of the scenes with the therapist, Dr. Cox, I was so pumped because this was like day 3 on the shoot. And if I'm not mistaken, all of the scenes, like where Richard comes to see her and then he comes back and he gets hypnotized and all that stuff, I believe it was 11 pages of script and we shot it all in one day. So we like banged off 10% or like 12% of the script in a day. And then we felt like we were ahead of the 8 ball a little bit, which was
Right.
really nice. So it just felt good to have that much of like a percentage mark on the loading bar, complete by day 3.
Especially
Like,
so early on where you're not
yeah.
stressing it out to the very end and then it
Yeah.
happens to work out.
So, I mean, credit to Richard and Marina, because like, I mean, that's 11 pages and pretty dialogue heavy and different tonal shifts within those scenes. So, I mean, they rocked it. That was great. So they were doing so nicely on the performance. I mean, I would obviously come in and be like, hey, why don't we try this? Why don't you do this? Okay, you want to do this time. But there was a lot more focus on just technical approach because they were really dialed in. So we got to be like, playing on our steady cam, and, I could focus more on camera movement and based on their performance and their, their ability to just kind of like work through these lines. I didn't have to cut anything that was a little bit more, cinematic, I guess. Like I didn't have to be like, okay, well, we just got to plunk the camera down here and just get this coverage. I was able to move around and we could rehearse a few kind of stylish shots as well to help kind of enhance those scenes and those moments.
Yeah, you got to keep them alive.
Yeah,
for sure. So your shoot was quick. I imagine your post-production was not as quick.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we got that assembly done coming up basically out of production, but obviously refining it down took a little while, and the post was pretty long just because we had a ton of shots, and not only that, but then we also had COVID kind of stretched everything out on the last leg of things where we're talking like sound engineering and audio, and you're still waiting for a few VFX shots because you don't want the audio guys to do the engineering until they can see exactly what's on screen. So it kind of became like a bit of a revolving door of like, okay, this shot's done, but we still need these other 2 to come down, and then we can ship that scene off to the sound guys, and then they can do it properly, and the mixing and all that. And then, like I said, COVID just complicated everything. It also created a festival run where I was in my cold basement doing interviews instead of traveling around, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is.
And you did do festivals.
Pardon me?
But you did do festivals.
We did do some festivals. Yeah. It went to the HP Lovecraft Film Festival and it won Best Feature, which is great. I'm a fan of Lovecraft. And I guess this checked the boxes on the cosmic horror side of things. They thought that, the science fiction elements kind of opening a rift through time was enough to kind of like tie into the cosmic horror, which I was happy to hear. Richard won Best Actor at the New York City Horror Film Festival. It went to Film Quest, Other Worlds Austin, Salem Horror Fest. So went to a bunch of really warm and amazing places that I couldn't go to. But I guess there's next time. So the anticipation will just build, I guess.
Yeah, it's cool that it got in though, and you got it in front of some people. I mean, I know it's not as good as being there, but
yeah, but again, like I mean, I can sit here and complain about having to do some Zoom calls from my basement, but I'm not the only one who's affected, right? Everyone's dealing with the same stuff, so
yeah.
Everyone's on pause, and then once we get back to it, then we'll just kind of pick up where we left off. And by then, hopefully, I'll have my next feature kind of gearing up for next summer, presumably. We're having a big rebound effect here in Winnipeg now that it's really busy. So I don't think I could even shoot my feature if I wanted to right now. I mean, I have a new script written. Obviously, I'm still polishing it up and finishing it up, but it's a summer film, and it's August already. So it's looking like I would, in a perfect world, would love to be shooting that like in June 2022.
There you go. Nice. And you got a lot of stunt work to keep you busy in the meantime.
yeah, that's been really good. Like I said, that rebound effect has definitely been felt here, and that just means I've had the opportunity to work on some fun projects, and it's been really nice actually just to get back to it.
Very cool. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find The Return?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so in Canada and the US, that's where the release is set for August 10th. And you can find it on TVOD, Transactional Video on Demand. That's iTunes, Google Play, those types of places where, transactional rentals and purchases take place. And in Canada, if you are in Canada, you can also find it on Super Channel Fuse. It's on like the SVOD platform there. And but it'll also be going to iTunes, Google Play, all of those transaction-based sites as well. So that's the first stop, and then we'll be looking at our streaming platform options as our next step, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
That's awesome. Well, BJ, thank you for taking the time to come on. It was really good talking to you.
Oh, thanks, Adam. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Best of luck with everything, and we're looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. And I'm looking forward to catching up with you. So I think I don't want to say too much about the next one, but it's a little bit more violent, a little bit more a little more mature, R-rated type deal. But I think you'll dig it. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you again in the future.
Very cool. We'll definitely do it. Sounds good.
Awesome. All right. Have a good one.
I'd like to thank BJ one more time for coming on the show to talk to me about his career, his stunt work, and of course his newest movie, The Return, which is available now. Make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. We have a lot more stuff coming your way, a lot more new movie coverage, recommendations, reviews, unboxings. Got another Comic-Con coming up, so you're going to have some con coverage. Not going to want to miss out. Also, make sure you listen to So Wizard Podcast every single week, wherever you get your podcasts. SoWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, merchandise, videos, and more. We love hearing feedback, so drop us a note in the comments, leave us something on social media. All accounts can be found after the show and in the show notes. So Wizard Podcast can also be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get multiple monthly bonus shows. And on a more personal note, a good friend and I have an ongoing comedy comic series out. It's called Social Studies. First chapter just wrapped up, and we have a crowdfunding campaign coming next month, September 1st, very soon. It's going to be a great time for everyone to jump on before Chapter 2 kicks off. You can find all that and more at socialstudiescomic.com. Thanks.